Okay guys, so I'm out here on the water, and of course we're out here to try out the Okuma Hakai bait caster, which is probably the hottest reel of the moment right now. A lot of anticipation for this reel, and I'll have to say that this might be the very first Okuma bait caster that I've ever even seen in person, let alone owned. And that's because I don't think my local Bass Pro Shops carried Okuma, and the Gander Mountain that was close to me before they closed, I don't think they carried Okuma either. So first impressions of the first Okuma baitcaster are very positive. The reel is very, very solid, feels very refined. When you crank the handle, you don't hear any kind of weird noises, no clicking, no squeaking, anything like that. So let's hope the Hakai performs as good as it feels. Now, what I want to try to find out about this reel today is, of course, how long can it cast? And also, we're going to see if the Hakai can actually handle a 3-gram lure, just like Okuma said. And we're going to do some pitching as well, because with a spool this light, it should be able to pitch with little to no effort, even light unweighted plastics. Now, I have the reel mounted on the JDM Shimano Bantam 6'8" medium. It's a regular fast action, and I have my typical 10-pound monofilament spooled up. And this is a rod and line combo that I've used to test several other reels in the past. It's kind of like my standard go-to, and we're talking really expensive reels like my Shimano Antares, Shimano METANIUM, DAIWA TATULA SV, as well as several others. But now it's time to see what this Hakai can do. Okay, so we're going to start off with a walking topwater that weighs in between 3/8 of an ounce and 1/2 ounce, so not the heaviest, but it should fly through the air really good. Now there's a lot of wind blowing all different directions today, so it should be a good test of how the brakes handle the wind. And let's set this reel up real quick. Now, since it's magnetic brakes, I'm going to set the spool tension to just eliminate that side-to-side play, because I don't want any restrictions of the spool spinning. All right, once again, the spool tension doesn't click, but it's very smooth when you turn it, but there is some resistance, so that should keep it from moving on accident. All right. So there's just a hair of side-to-side play, but you can see the fall on this lure is very fast. All right, so I got the brakes turned up to 10, and I'm gonna do a few preliminary casts just to let this new line settle on the spool. And here we go. Okay, so on that cast, the casting of this reel so far is ultra smooth and quiet. Reminds me of when I first cast the DAIWA TATULA with the T-wing. You're expecting some kind of noise, but it's just eerily quiet and smooth. Now, since this reel is so light, this is definitely a reel that I would use for doing a walking topwater, just like this bait here. All right, let's cast it into the wind and see what happens. All right, so the lure definitely got stalled in the wind, but since we're on max brakes, no problems at all. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, now that I got the line settled on the spool, is I'm gonna back these brakes down as low as they'll go off camera and show you guys what it can do. But first, I'm gonna show you what the distance looks like on max brake setting. All right, so I'll give you guys one more. So that's probably going out there about 30 yards, 35 yards on max brake setting. But casting is very, very smooth. Cranking in this lure is also very smooth. Once again, these EVA power knobs are very, very soft. thankfully. All right, let me back these brakes down and then I'll show you what it can do. Okay guys, so I've backed the brakes down and the lowest I can go with minimal overrun is right around 8. And let me show you what this Hakai can do. Boom. So you're probably looking at about 45 yards. Now there was one cast I did with a little bit of backwind that easily went over 50 yards. And in fact, I'm gonna back the brakes down to about 7. And here we go. Pow. So that was probably going close to 50 yards effortlessly and super quiet and smooth. It's very eerie. Now I'm used to Shimano's with the centrifugal brakes rubbing on the brake hub and making some kind of a humming noise. And you can feel a slight vibration through the frame, but with this Hakai, it's just eerily quiet and eerily smooth. All right, we'll do a couple of more. There's a wind to my back. Boom, that went well over 50 yards. A little bit of wind assistance. All right, we're gonna do a couple more long bomb casts. Oh, look at that. So I released a little bit early, caused the lure to tumble through the air, caused an overrun, as you guys saw, but it sorted itself out by the end of the cast. Boom. Now, is that any farther than any other bait caster? I would say probably not some of your more elite reels like your Antares and METANIUM and maybe even the CURADO MGL 150, but it is very, very comparable. We'll do 3 more casts. Ooh. Boom, that was close to 50 yards. Boom. That was about a 50-yard bomb right there. Now I wish I brought out another reel to compare the Hakai with, but that's what my field cast battles are for. Now let's switch up lures. Okay, so now it's time to test Okuma's claims of the Hakai being able to easily handle down to 3 grams. And that is the benefit of having such an ultralight spool. Is not necessarily huge casting distance, but huge casting range, meaning you'll be able to switch from a heavy bait down to an ultralight bait without having to switch to a different reel. So to test this out, we have the Rapala, what is it, the ultralight pop number 4. It weighs about 3.1 grams on the scale. Of course, I have a snap swivel tied on, but keep in mind this rod is not rated down to lures that light. It's rated down to 1/4 ounce. So with this popper, we're looking at slightly under 1/8 ounce. So let's see what the Hakai can do. I've turned the brakes to number 6 on the external dial. Okay. Did you guys see where that landed? It landed out there probably at least 80 feet. There was a little bit of overrun, so I'm gonna turn the brakes up just a little to about 7. But yeah, we're getting close to 75 to 80 feet casting this ultralight popper here. Now I'm still getting overrun, so I'm gonna turn the brakes to almost 8. There we go, that cured the overrun right there. And the thing about it is that not only is this popper going out a great distance, but it's going straight. It's going pretty much where I'm aiming for. It's not going off to the left because I'm right-handed. So yeah, that is the benefit of having probably the lightest stock spool of any reel in the world, or at least one of them that's not a bait finesse reel. And these are just easy sidearm casts. Let's do some overhead with this ultralight lure. All right, need a little bit of an adjustment with the release point. There we go. I got it now. So we're dipping well into bait finesse territory. And keep in mind, this is a standard Hakai, not the bait finesse model. So yeah, you can definitely dip into some bait finesse, especially if you feel the spool probably only about halfway. Distance is great, but ease of casting and accuracy is even more impressive. Usually with other reels that can handle this low, I have to make some kind of a adjustment to my cast to make it go straight. Apparently not with this Hakai. All right, let's change up lures. Okay, so I've moved to a quieter part of this little cove here, away from the wind. And before we test the pitching, let's test the cranking power of this reel. Now keep in mind, I have the lowest gear ratio of 6.2 to 1, but I've tied on this double willow spinnerbait. And let's see how easy this cranks the spinnerbait through the water. Okay, I just lobbed it out there. It went out way farther than intended. Once again, the product of such a light spool, you're going to be able to cast farther with less effort. And yeah, this spinnerbait is, it doesn't even feel like there's any resistance there. There is resistance, but it's not that arm burning resistance that you would get from a reel that's got less power and a higher gear ratio. And once again, they fitted these reels with a oversized 42mm brass gear. And yeah, this spinnerbait is getting cranked through the water effortlessly. And of course, these big power style knobs definitely help as well. Even when I burn it, I don't get that normal forearm burning sensation. So yeah, 6.2 to 1 gear ratio, Okuma Hakai. Definitely a reel that I would use for spinnerbait duty. Okay guys, so next up is going to be this Zoom Fluke, and with this hook you're looking at a lure weight of about 8.5 grams on the scale, so just a little bit heavier than a 1/4 ounce and a little bit lighter than 3/8 of an ounce. So by American bass fishing standards, this is definitely considered a lightweight lure. So let's pitch this thing around. Now, I've already set the brakes to what I believe is their optimal pitching setting, at least for this lure. And let's show you what the Hakai can do. Ooh, had a little bit of overrun there. Tends to happen when you have like a rainbow pitch and the lure kind of stalls. But I'm able to almost pitch across this little cove here. Hopefully you guys can see there's branches right on the other side. So that's a good probably 40 to 45 feet. Of course, if I do a higher trajectory, just like I did right there, we hit the other side of the cove. But pitching, at least in my opinion, is not a distance technique. Now, while there is some distance required in some situations, it's more about accuracy. And I've definitely found with reels that have lighter spools, it's a lot easier to be accurate and pitch farther with less effort. So hopefully you guys can see there's a rock poking out of the water over there. Let's see if I can hit it with this Hakai. Oh, well, I really overshot the target there by like 5 feet. Okay, so I hit just behind that rock by about a foot. Man, it just keeps on going past the target. Now these are some really high trajectory pitches. I'm gonna try to lower my trajectory a little bit. All right, still overshooting the target. So that is definitely the result of having such a lightweight spool. There we go, I hit right in front of the rock. You put the same effort into the pitch that you would a heavier spool, and it goes farther. Oh, that was way short. That was a little bit short. Okay, that was off to the right by a couple of feet. All right, so that was off to the right by about a foot. But yeah, we're looking at a target probably about 40 feet away. Yeah, that was right in front of the rock. And even with these low trajectory pitches I'm doing, we are hitting right around the target. Now, someone who is better at pitching, there I hit the other rock, has better accuracy, should be able to hit that with no problem. Boom, hit right beside the rock by like an inch. So yeah, this reel is definitely a reel that will excel in pitching because of the light, low inertia spool. So yeah, pitching on the Hakai is definitely impressive. And once again, I didn't bring a reel to compare it with, but that might come in the future. Okay, so now what are my thoughts on this Okuma Hakai now that I took it out on the water, did some casting and retrieving, and I guess I got a general feel for this reel. Now, first of all, this is probably one of the quietest and smoothest reels I've used in quite a while. I mean, everything about this reel is very quiet. It hardly makes any noise at all. I think the only noise it made was on probably the very longest cast with the top water. Maybe the bearings gave a little bit of noise, but when it came to everything else, casting, retrieving, cranking the handle, this reel is just supremely smooth and quiet. It doesn't make any kind of rattles or ticking noises or screeches or anything like that. Very well built, and dare I say, when I was cranking in that double-bladed willow spinnerbait, the reel gave me the impression of being just as buttery smooth as Shimano reels, despite using EVA foam knobs instead of Shimano's rubber knobs. So that's pretty impressive. There are a lot of reels more expensive than this that make a whole lot of noise when operating them. So a very, very refined effort from Okuma, and this is despite having a relatively low bearing count compared to a lot of other reels. Now when it came to the performance, you can see that this reel has a huge casting range, as to be expected with having such a lightweight spool. He was easily handling that 3-gram popper, and keep in mind the rod I was using was not a bait finesse rod. So if I strung it up with some lighter line, put it on a bait finesse rod, and probably even keeping the spool full, I believe you could dip into some upper range bait finesse, and maybe if you fill the spool probably less than halfway, maybe even dip down into lower end bait finesse. And I might test that out, but keep in mind this is the regular deeper spooled model. This is not the bait finesse model. Now, I'm not sure when the bait finesse model is going to come out, but from the pictures I saw, it should have a shallower spool. I'm not sure if it's going to be lighter or not, but even if it's the same weight as the regular model, that's still well into acceptable spool weight for bait finesse. So I'm eagerly waiting for that model to come out. Now when it came to pitching, hopefully you guys saw that I was overshooting my target most of the time. With this flight spool, it takes very little effort to pitch even lighter unweighted plastics. Now if I was pitching something like a lighter jig or a weighted plastic, I think my accuracy would have been way better than using that weightless fluke. So this reel should be a pitching machine. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about is the casting distance. Now, I feel this reel does cast pretty far, and I was reviewing some of the footage that I took from casting that very same lure with the CURADO 150 MGL, and honestly I feel they're comparable. But once again, I didn't bring a reel to cast side by side this thing, so I really couldn't tell you how it would compare to other reels. But that's where my field cast battles come into play, because the next time you see this Hakai, it is going to be challenging some very expensive competition, as well as some reels that are in its own price range out on the field, and we're going to do some measured cast battles. But so far, just from that brief time I had it on the water, I'm really liking this reel. The only real complaint that I had was that even though this thumb bar had some slots molded into it, I did find I had to wipe it free of water a few times when I was casting out there. But other than that, everything else was excellent. So stay tuned for more videos on this Hakai, and we're going to see how it does up against some other reels in measured cast distance battles. Alright guys, thanks a lot.